Let's summarize the coverage and sectorization of the public sector. To determine whether an entity belongs in the public sector and, if so, where in the public sector we should classify it, we consider
residence, institutional unit, control, and market versus non-market activity.
GFS and PSDS are compiled for all resident units, except for non-resident special purpose entities of government that are involved in fiscal activities.
Therefore, we need to determine if an entity is a resident of the domestic economy. If it is not a resident, the entity is classified as part of the rest of the world, a non-resident. If it is a resident, we must determine whether the entity is an institutional unit. If it is not an institutional unit, the entity is classified as an integral part of the unit that controls the entity, the parent unit. If the entity is an institutional unit, then we ask, who controls the unit? The indicators of control help decide whether it is controlled by the government, by another public corporation, or by the private sector. If it is controlled by the private sector, the entity is classified either as a private non-financial corporation, a private financial corporation, a household, or a non-profit institution serving households. If the entity is controlled by the government or by another public corporation, it belongs in the public sector.
Then we ask, what is the unit's principal economic activity?
Is it a market producer or a non-market producer? The answer depends on whether or not the unit charges economically significant prices. If the unit is a non-market producer, then we ask two more questions before we can classify it in the general government sector. First, can we identify a market establishment within the unit that satisfies the criteria to be an institutional unit? Second, if not, we ask if the unit is a financial auxiliary. If it is not a financial auxiliary, then the unit is part of the general government sector. If we can identify a market establishment, that is a separate institutional unit, we classify that market establishment as part of the public corporations sector. If the unit is a market producer, we classify it as part of the public corporations sector. If the unit is providing or producing financial services, we classify it as a public financial corporation. If not, it is a public non-financial corporation.
The public sector is divided into the general government sector, the non-market producers, and public corporations, the market producers.
We can further divide the general government into central, state, and local governments subsectors, as applicable. For each of these subsectors, we can distinguish a main budgetary account and extra budgetary accounts. We can classify social security funds either with the level of government that controls it or as a separate subsector of general government.
We can divide public corporations into public non-financial and public financial corporations.
For the latter, we then distinguish between public deposit-taking corporations and other public financial corporations. A coding system can identify the various subsectors of the public sector for ease of international comparison of PSDS. GL1, GL2, GL3, GL4, and GL5.